Hello, I'm the Grub Street Lodger and welcome to my house. That's what this mess is. It's my house. Mine as in I bought it subject to 30 odd years mortgage repayments. It was not a very expensive house as houses go, though it was expensive to me, and I've got to work quite hard over the next month to make it livable. This is my bedroom. It currently has a bit of a multi-storey car park vibe. Just over there is my spare library. That's even worse. And then downstairs, well, the whole thing's being chopped up and lining put in to damp proof it. In fact, this house has been unlived in for over almost 2 years. I still can't get the heating to work because of problems with the gas meter. That gets sorted out at the end of the week. Though I do have electricity and internet now. I'm not living here yet, but I'm working to make it livable. And then actually, shortly after I move in, I've got 2 weeks Easter holiday. So then I'll try to make it somewhere someone might actually want to live. It feels a bit daunting at the moment, but I feel I've got a list and I'm ticking it off, which is not usually my way of dealing with things, but it seems to be working. My emotions are telling me that this will never ever be somewhere I can be happy. But my brain is saying it will. Just keep at it, and that's what I'm going to do today. For these reasons, I haven't actually read many books this month, or last month in February. So I think we should go through them. And as we go through them, I'm also going to go through different rooms of the house. Enjoy the tour. Welcome to my front room. It's going to be my primary library. I'm going to have bookcases here and bookcases here all along. Poster, the Samuel Johnson text poster, is going to be here. And this is going to be my main library, where my armchairs are going to be, maybe my sofa if it fits. And it's going to be sort of the cosy, comfy reading room, mainly. It's been severely chopped up, as you can see. And as you can't see, there's all this plastic lining underneath, because this is the main room where damp was. And in here, we're going to talk about Edmund, Curll, Bookseller, by Paul Baines and Pat Rogers. Now, there have been 2 biographies of the bookseller, the 18th century bookseller Edmund Curll. One in the 1930s or 40s, I think, which I read. It was called The Unspeakable Curll by a guy called Strauss. And the other one, this one, which came out in 2007. They say in the intro to this newer book, 2007 book, that the Strauss one is more interesting than theirs. And they're kind of right. Strauss didn't have access to nearly as many documents and details as these two, and he sort of responds to that in a kind of cheeky, rapscallion-y kind of way. And so he admits he doesn't know where Curll was born, doesn't really care, says, well, he's buried, but I haven't gone to visit the grave. And he paints Curll as a rapscallion, and he, as himself as the author, is a bit of an academic rapscallion, because Curll has a bit of a reputation for being a bit of a dick, mainly. So the new book, or the newer book, is much more neutral and much more, I'd say, fact-based, because the Strauss one has access to, uses the facts he has access to. But since digitisation of libraries and just the general greater, easier collaboration allowed by the web, the fact that they don't have to go on steamer ships to go across the ocean to do their research means that there's a lot more detail. And so this book is very valuable in terms of establishing what the truth is rather than the myth. But as such, it's not as entertaining. But I'm glad, I think it's good that both these exist, because then you've got the one for the sort of interesting story of the scampy Curll, and then the other, a more sober appraisal of Curll and his business practices. I mean, the fact is, Curll was right, okay. So Curll and Pope had a lifelong feud. To Curll, Pope was a sort of wannabe elite, snobby, up his own arse person who had what coming to him. To Pope, Curll was the symbol of everything wrong with the new Grub Street era. And in many ways he was. Curll was an unfettered capitalist, essentially. He did things like, if he managed to get a private letter of Pope's from someone, he'd publish a whole book around it. He'd be calling it Pope's Missionaries, and he'd have the one little bit of actual new Pope, and then he'd shove it with other things he'd had before, and sometimes things that don't even make sense. One of his Pope Missionaries includes all of Henry VIII's love letters to Anne Boleyn. So Curll was great at creating title pages and creating buzz and creating word of mouth, and he mainly sort of went after old out of print stuff that he'd repackage, but occasionally he'd get something new and then he'd make that the focus of his repackaging. He also did these biographies where he'd announce, right, I'm writing a biography of this recently deceased important person. If you've got anything you want to add to it to make it a better biography, give it to me. And when it came out, it consisted of maybe a small essay from one of his hired writers, any vaguely related stuff he had about that person already and had published before. If he had received letters with extra detail, he put those in. And then the will, because the will was public knowledge, you could get that publicly. So his biographies always had their will at the end of it. And indeed, this one has Curll's will at the end of it. If he were alive today, he really would be, and these "if you're alive today" things can be a bit funny, but he really would have been the kind of person who got a bunch of stuff off Gutenberg Press, copied it, pasted it, and made some money on Amazon. He'd be the kind of person who'd be using AI to write 45 salad cookbooks that he'd be selling off. What he does, or what he did, was essentially unfettered capitalism. It was all about finding his audience and finding his market, and that's what he did. And so you can't really lionize him as fighting for the common man against the snooty elites exactly. But he is interesting, and he's someone who understood the moment he lived in. Though I don't know if I'd be on his side if he were around now. I don't think I'm on the side of the Amazon scalpers, but that's very much the kind of person he was. And this book gives you in an awful lot of detail sort of how he did it and what he did, and almost every publication he ever put forth is listed with his dates and his times and how he repackaged and all this. So it's a really good resource for someone who wants to know about how the very excesses of Grub Street were performed, and also their limits, because he didn't starve authors in garrets. No one ever got rich off Curll, but he wasn't a tricky businessman to the people he worked with, and he also had a really big interest in antiquary stuff, which seems to have been a genuine interest of his, and those antiquary books had a lot more love put into them than, say, the biographies or the things that he produced to annoy Pope. So yeah, it's a good book. But if you want one that's just sort of more fun, the Strauss book, The Unspeakable Curl, is that. But this is, as I say, a really good resource for someone who wants to know how Grub Street really worked. And I'm the Grub Street lodger, so I do. So I enjoyed it. But it was very dense, and it took me a long time, especially with all this going on. We're going to go to another room now. Okay? This room is going to be where my dining room is going to be, well, my dining table. It's going to be a bit of an all-purpose workroom. It's where I plan to do my writing. You'll be the busy, bright hub of the house. It is bright. Can't believe how dirty it is at the moment, though. There was a bunch of screed. I don't really know what screed is, put on the floor. It's like concrete, but it just cracked when I walked on it. When I peeled it off, there were a bunch of vinyl 70s tiles. So I chipped them all off, made a terrible mess, and then the back half of the room I've been able to chip off the concrete because it's been wet from the dampness, and so it's sort of stuck. So I started scraping it, and then the damp people have come in, so I had to stop. And so it's half tiled, half concrete, mostly mud. It stinks. Hey, it's what I'm going to talk about my next book. And the next book is Mothers of the Novel by Dale Spender. This came out in 1987, and it came out with a whole series of reprinted books of women 18th century and early 19th century novelists. And I've been almost accidentally collecting these books for a few years now because, well, whenever I see an interesting long 18th century novel that either I haven't heard of or I have heard of, and oh, there it is in the charity shop, I picked it up. So I've now got quite a set of these and read a few of them. And this was sort of the book that went along to launch it and to say why it existed. And so, yeah, that's what it is. And it's essentially a polemical work, because what Dale Spender's saying is she went to write a book about women novels, women novelists and women's novels. She thought, well, Jane Austen's the mother of the novel, so it'll go from her on, but I'll have a chapter about the people that came before her. And when she started researching that chapter, she realised there were loads of them. And not only that there were loads of them, but there were really good novels and really good novelists. And more than that, that for the last half of the 18th century, the women novelists, there were not only more of them than men, but they outsold the men, and in terms of critical reception, they outdid the men. The women in many ways were the mothers of the novel, and they disappeared. And in general conception, the novel's founders are, Sterne, Richardson, Defoe, Smollett sometimes. And generally, the last half of the 18th century is considered a dead zone. But it wasn't a dead zone, it was full of novels and full of novelists, but they're all women and they've all disappeared. And this brought out anger, to be honest. And the book is this polemic, it's going through this history of these women novelists, and it's saying they've all been wiped out of history and they've all been wiped out of the canon. And this one, it's claimed it's because she was too sort of scandalous. But this one, it was claimed she was too demure. This one wrote too experimentally. This one wrote too formally. The only thing they all have in common is that one, they've disappeared, and two, they're all women. And so that's the polemic of the book. And it's quite a hard read in some ways, because the book's aim, and what it does very well, is to just keep going after this point. And it's a very fair point. But yeah, the other part the book does, though, is it wants to say, you should check these out. And so it gives you these lives and sort of some analysis of some of these novels and some descriptions of some of these novels and just some gushing over some of these novels to encourage you to check them out. And that's the bit that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the enthusiastic, almost like a friend going, oh, check this out, check this out, check this out, with all these brilliant women novelists. And so that's the two parts of the book. And it came out in 1987, as I said. I don't know if it had a big impact or not. I think it should have. One, because it's this big book accompanying this whole series of reprints, but also because it's a very good point and it's very well expressed. I think it should have done something. And living now, there is some change. There was a BBC, about 15 years ago, a BBC TV programme in which, for example, Evelina is cited as one of the sort of prototype first foundational novels, but it is described as the prototype foundational of chick lit. And Dale Spender would not have enjoyed that, because she would have seen that as just another way of lumping all women's writing in one genre while men get all these other genres. So, how far we have gone. I know that Eliza Haywood is getting a lot more love now, and it's very well deserved. I love Eliza Haywood. That Love and Excess features more on early novel courses, or at the very least something like Phantomina, which is short and brilliant. So there has been some shift towards acknowledging women novelists, and certainly I'd heard of about 80% of them, and I've read maybe about 50%, not everything of all of theirs, but something from all of them. But there were still some I'd never heard of at all. And even the ones I have heard of aren't given the love and the respect I think are their due. So there's still a lot of work to be done based on from this point. So yeah, it was a really brilliant, eye-opening book, and it made me want to. Well, it made me buy Del Rivia Manley's New Atlantis. I was going to start reading it, but it's a little bit heavy for the moment. I haven't quite got the focus. Indeed, focus has been the trouble this month as well. So few books, and Mothers of Novel and Edmund Curll were a little bit dense, a little bit heavy. But both brilliant, and Mothers of Novel makes a really good point that still stands today, almost 30 years on. Even if things have changed a little, they've not changed enough. I don't think that we should have a men versus women view of the history of the novel, but the novel is a human art, and men and women are both humans. So there we go. We're going to go to another room to discuss the last book. Right, this is the aforementioned spare bedroom, or spare library, or spare bedribrary, as I've been calling it. This is the cosy spot where people can come to stay. Well, it will be. And it's where we talk about our last book, The Photograph by Penelope Lively. I read a few Penelope Lively now, some for adults, some for children. I met her a few times because she was a guest lecturer at my master's course. She was very good and very knowledgeable. This book must have actually come out 2007, so this must have come out about the time she was doing our lectures. So I've read it now. She's still alive. I thought she died, but she's 94. She's still alive. And so The Photograph, a very tight book about memory and about identity and about how we remember someone and how they're not always the person we remember, and how our memories of them probably say more about us than they do about the person we're remembering, and things like that. So a widower he's an academic, and he's going through his files to get some stuff for a paper, and a bunch of his wife's papers fall on the floor, and he thought he'd got rid of all that stuff, but there's some, including an envelope saying, do not look, destroy. So of course he looks, and it's a photograph of his wife in a set compromising position. To be honest, they're only holding hands with his brother-in-law, and now he's like, oh, my brother-in-law had an affair with my wife. And so he goes to find out more about that. And in doing so, he has to confront his memories of his wife and all the other people in her life also do. So the brother-in-law, his sister, and the niece, and they all confront the person that they thought was the wife. And it all leads up to what I would say is a revelation, but it's not really, because one, it's kind of obvious where it's going on this, but more importantly, all the characters know this revelation. It's not new to them. It's not a revelation. It's just something they don't think about. And so it's a very small work in terms of, it's very tight in this emotional range. And each chapter, they're all third person, but they're very, very tethered to a character, and they spend a lot of time in that character's head. It's a different one for each chapter, and some chapters two characters share, so the point of view goes in and out the heads of two characters, and so we find out a lot about how they think. And there's a lot of sort of little details about, say, their work and stuff. Where the academic is a landscape historian, and the sister is actually a landscape designer. And they're quite on the nose metaphors about how these characters work, but also they keep thinking about their work, even when they're trying to solve this riddle that isn't really a riddle about this dead character. Their brains keep going back to this, and it shows you how their minds work, which then fills in the rest of the story for you. So it's very, there's a lot said without much being said. It's very, very skillfully done in that sense. And it's very good. I preferred it to Moon Tiger, partly because there was no incest in it. That helped. And I've got a few more Penelope Lively's in some boxes somewhere. And when I dig them out, I look forward to reading them, because she's very good. And I'd like to be very good. Anyway, from the mess that I'm in, I'm going to go and make some more mess, and also tidy some up. And that's me for the day. So thank you for being with me, and hopefully when I do March's books, I'll be in here, and hopefully by the time I do April's books, I'll have prettied up. I kind of plan to make a video about this house when the whole thing's done. A little bit Homes Under the Hammer. I'm sure some people might enjoy that. Thank you very much.